There is a man in Polk City, Florida, who owns the last airworthy 4-engine passenger flying boat on Earth. Not one of the last, the last. 1 aircraft, 1 collector, and roughly £57,000 of Second World War British maritime engineering that no other institution in the world has managed to keep flying. His name is Kermit Weeks. His collection, assembled across 4 decades at a facility he calls Fantasy of Flight, spans the entire first century of human aviation, from World War I fighters assembled from wood and fabric to Korean War-era bombers. Between them sits every major milestone in between. He owns approximately 150 aircraft. More than 40 of them are the only surviving examples of their type on the planet. What follows is the 10 most extraordinary machines in that collection, ordered by rarity, mechanical complexity, and the sheer weight of what it took to save them. Number 1 is not what you expect. Stay there. The Albatros D.Va was the primary German fighter aircraft of 1917. Elliptical wings, plywood monocoque fuselage, a 6-cylinder inline Mercedes D2er producing 172 horsepower, which at the time represented genuine mechanical sophistication. The aircraft reached 116 miles per hour at altitude, which was competitive enough for the Western Front in the summer of 1917, and not nearly enough by the autumn. Original examples do not fly. The surviving DV airframes are static museum pieces, wood rots, fabric fails. The Mercedes engines are irreplaceable and sitting in institutions that will not run them. Weeks solved this through a partnership with the vintage aviator LMT in Wellington, New Zealand, Peter Jackson's dedicated WWII aircraft reproduction operation. The arrangement: Weeks supplied an original authenticated Mercedes D-Toin-A engine from his parts repository. TVAL built a complete airworthy airframe around it. The result is not a reproduction of what a DVA sounded like. It is a DVA, producing the exact acoustic and mechanical signature of a 1917 German fighter. To fund the engine, Weeks traded a pristine original Sopwith 1.5 strutter to TVAL. He gave away a complete airframe to get one back that was alive. That is the standard this collection operates to. The Albatross represents the beginning of Weeks' timeline: wood, fabric, and a borrowed engine from the war that started aviation's century. Number 9 represents the end of an era that had barely progressed beyond it. The last biplane fighter the United States Navy ever deployed to its carriers, recovered from the floor of the Pacific Ocean. The Grumman F3F-2 entered service in 1937. It was the final biplane fighter the US Navy and Marine Corps would ever operate. The following year, the Grumman F4F Wildcat, a monoplane, was already in development. The F3F-2 was obsolete before the ink on its production orders dried. Wright R1820 engine, 950 horsepower. Maximum speed 264 miles per hour. It was fast for a biplane and completely outclassed by anything it would have met in actual combat. The Navy flew it anyway because it was what they had, and it was extraordinarily maneuverable. Weeks acquired his F3F-2 through a trade with the San Diego Air and Space Museum. The specific airframe had been ditched in the Pacific off San Diego in August 1940 by First Lieutenant Bob Galler, who later became a Double Ace and Medal of Honor recipient. After a mechanical valve malfunction killed the engine, Galler survived. The aircraft sank. It was on the ocean floor for 48 years before being recovered in 1988. Forensic examination of the recovered airframe proved the mechanical failure, exonerating Galler from any suggestion of pilot error. The aircraft sat under the Pacific for nearly half a century. It is still in Weeks' collection. The F3F-2 represents the absolute terminus of the biplane fighter era, the last of its kind from a Navy that had already moved on. Number 8 represents something different. A weapon designed by a regime running out of time, out of materials, and out of options, built by unskilled labor in 250 man-hours. Intended to be flown once. By 1944, the Allied strategic bombing campaign was dismantling German industrial infrastructure with systematic precision. The Reichsluftfahrtministerium needed a point defense interceptor that could be produced without skilled labor, without strategic materials, and without a conventional airfield. Engineer Erich Bachem designed the answer, backed directly by Heinrich Himmler and SS Capital. Bypassing the conventional military procurement entirely, The Ba 349 Natter was built from wood, glued and nailed together in a quarter of the man-hours required for a conventional fighter. It launched vertically. A Walter HWK liquid fuel rocket engine in the tail, augmented by 4 external Schmidding solid fuel boosters strapped to the fuselage. Together they produced a climb rate of 37,000 feet per minute. To put that in terms a modern pilot would recognize, a standard light aircraft climbs at around 500 feet per minute. The Natter did 74 times that. The operational profile: climb vertically toward an incoming bomber formation under autopilot guidance. Take manual control. Fire 24 unguided 73mm rockets from the nose. Pull a lever. The aircraft splits. The valuable rocket engine descends by parachute for reuse. The pilot descends separately. On paper, the only manned vertical test flight ended with the pilot killed when the cockpit canopy detached on launch. The program was cancelled days before the war ended. Original examples exist. One unrestored airframe sits at the National Air and Space Museum in Washington. The fantasy of flight holds a high accuracy replica. It is not a reproduction in the decorative sense. It is a three-dimensional engineering document of the most desperate weapon the Second World War produced. The Natter was built under the SS because conventional channels had run out of answers. Number 7 was built in a factory in Michigan in 1929, survived 30 years of commercial service, was crushed nearly in half by a hurricane, and was rebuilt to a standard of historical accuracy that required stopping production because the wrong type of rivet had been installed. The Ford 4ATB tri-motor entered service in 1928. 3 Pratt & Whitney Wasp radial engines, total horsepower combined, roughly 900. Maximum speed 130 miles per hour. The corrugated aluminium skin that gave it the nickname Tin Goose was not an aesthetic choice. Corrugation added structural rigidity without additional weight, a practical engineering solution from an era that had not yet discovered how to work with smooth aluminium. Weeks specific airframe, registration N7584. Spent years hauling mail and school children for Island Airways between Port Clinton, Ohio and the Lake Erie Islands. In August 1992, anticipating Hurricane Andrew, Weeks flew the aircraft to Homestead Airport and sheltered it inside what he believed was a sufficiently reinforced concrete hangar. Andrew's barometric pressure blew the hangar doors off. The sustained winds pushed an 18-wheel fuel truck across the hangar floor. The truck hit the Ford tri-motor and twisted the fuselage completely in half aft of the passenger door. Both wings came off. The subsequent restoration at Great Lakes Aviation in Michigan became a forensic exercise in period accuracy. When Weeks inspected the work in progress and noticed that modern AN 470 universal head rivets were being used to reattach the aluminium skins, he stopped production and had them replaced. Ford used round head rivets in 1929. The restored aircraft uses round head rivets. Every rivet on the airframe is period correct. This is what the collection considers acceptable restoration practice. The tri-motor was rebuilt from near destruction to period correct exactness. Number 6 was found in a worse condition, abandoned in the Alaskan wilderness, shattered, forgotten, and required 4 decades and 40,000 man-hours before it flew again. Igor Sikorsky built 21 S-39 amphibious biplanes between 1930 and 1931. One remains airworthy. It is in Weeks' collection. The S-39 is a single-engine amphibian with a Pratt & Whitney Wasp Jr. producing 300 horsepower, wooden hull, biplane configuration with a parasol upper wing, range of 400 miles. It was the aircraft of choice for wealthy explorers and documentary filmmakers who needed to land on African lakes or Bornean rivers without a runway. The naturalists Martin and Osa Johnson used an S-39 extensively for their photographic safaris through Africa in the 1930s, which is the history the Spirit of Igor honors with its meticulously researched giraffe spot paint scheme. Weeks' airframe was found derelict in the Alaskan bush in the 1960s, a collapsed hull, structurally irretrievable by any conventional measure. Aviation restorer Dick Jackson spent 40 years and an estimated 40,000 man-hours rebuilding it. Weeks acquired it from Jackson in a negotiation conducted mid-air while both men were flying the aircraft together. Weeks convincing Jackson in the cockpit that the restored machine would be properly funded, properly flown, and properly safeguarded at fantasy of flight. It is currently certified as the oldest flying Sikorsky aircraft in the world. It has been airworthy since Weeks acquired it. 40 years of work in the air. Drop Sunderland in the comments right now. Just that word. It tells us you are still here, and it matters, because this channel continues because of the people who watch it this far. Number 5 has one of the most resonant histories in the collection. Stay with it. The P-51B and C variants carried the same Packard Merlin engine that made the D model famous. 1,490 horsepower, 437 miles per hour, in an earlier, narrower fuselage with a framed canopy instead of the teardrop bubble. Less visibility. Same performance, the same long-range escort capability that ended the catastrophic losses the 8th Air Force was suffering over German industrial targets in late 1943. Weeks' 1944 P-51C is painted in the precise livery of the 332nd Fighter Group, red cowling, red tail surfaces. The exact nose art of ace pilot Lee Archer's wartime aircraft, inner the Mac and Bell. The 332nd is the Tuskegee Airmen, the African-American fighter group that flew as bomber escort and, by documented record, never lost a bomber to enemy fighters during their escort missions. Weeks was the first private collector to paint a Mustang in Tuskegee colors to actively campaign for their historical recognition. He flew the aircraft in a series of low passes for surviving members of the group at a dedicated ceremony. He was subsequently inducted as an honorary member of their organization and presented with the red jacket that signifies membership. The aircraft won Grand Champion Warbird at EAA Air Venture Oshkosh, the highest distinction in the warbird community. The award is not given for the significance of the paint scheme. It is given for the precision of the restoration. The Tuskegee Mustang earns its place through historical weight and restoration excellence. Number 4 earns its place through simple arithmetic. Of 5,256 aircraft built, 6 survive in any condition. Only 1 is structurally capable of flying. It is in Florida. Weeks owns it, and he flew it directly into the airfield where the aircraft's darkest history was made. The Martin B-26 Marauder was a medium bomber designed in 1939 and rushed into production before prototype flight testing was complete. The first production variants had a very high wing loading relative to their weight, a design consequence of the emphasis on speed over low-speed stability. At 150 miles per hour on final approach, trainee crews who misjudged the energy requirements stalled and died. At MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, Florida, the phrase "one a day in Tampa Bay" was not hyperbole. It was close to an operational statistic. Subsequent variants with longer wingspans, increased wing incidence, and an enlarged vertical stabilizer solved the problem. The operational Marauder finished the war in the 9th Air Force with the lowest combat loss rate of any American aircraft in that command. The reputation never recovered. 5,256 were built. 6 exist today, 5 are static. Weeks B-26, serial number 40-1370, is the only airframe on Earth structurally capable of returning to flight. In 1998, aware of the aircraft's specific MacDill history, Weeks flew the Marauder directly into MacDill Air Force Base for an airshow and flew it out again. It became the last B-26 to operate from that runway. The aircraft remained flying until 2004, when it was grounded pending the overhaul of at least one of its massive Pratt & Whitney R2800 radial engines. It has not flown since. The Marauder is irreplaceable and grounded. Number 3 is 2 aircraft, both connected to the same man, both with histories that would seem implausible in fiction, both acquired by Weeks through circumstances that defy conventional provenance. Howard Hughes owned an extraordinary number of aircraft during his lifetime. 2 of them are in Weeks' collection, and each carries a history that operates in a different category from standard aviation provenance. The first is the Sikorsky S-43 amphibian, registration N440. Hughes purchased it directly from the factory in 1937 and outfitted it with long-range fuel tanks for an intended round-the-world speed record attempt. The project was abandoned when regulatory complications and the outbreak of WWII made the attempt impossible. In May 1943, Hughes used the S-43 on Lake Mead to conduct water handling tests in preparation for the massive H-4 Hercules flying boat project. A weight and balance miscalculation caused the aircraft to crash on the lake. 2 men died. Hughes survived. He salvaged the aircraft from the lake floor, spent a considerable sum rebuilding it, and subsequently used it as a personal flying yacht. 2 Pratt & Whitney R-1830 radials, 1100 horsepower combined, maximum speed 190 miles per hour, range of 775 miles. It is currently under structural restoration at the Polk City facility. The second Hughes aircraft is the Boeing 307 Stratoliner, known as the Cosmic Muffin. The Stratoliner was the first pressurized commercial airliner to enter regular service, a genuinely revolutionary aircraft that used the wing, engines, and tail assembly of the B-17 Flying Fortress mated to a large circular pressurized fuselage. This specific airframe was modified by Hughes at the request of actress Rita Hayworth. 3 windows near the aircraft's internal bar were raised higher than the standard window line, so she could look at the clouds while seated. The fuselage was later converted into a luxury houseboat, retaining Hughes' personal telephone and original Art Deco interior fittings. Weeks acquired it in February 2024. It will be displayed permanently on the lake at the Polk City facility. The houseboat that used to be an airliner that used to belong to Howard Hughes. The Hughes aircraft carry history that is genuinely stranger than invention. Number 2 carries something different. 28 hours and 38 minutes of total flight time, a forced landing in Belgium in 1944, and a restoration that will produce the only flying example of its type on the planet when it is complete. The Hawker Tempest Mk 5 was the fastest low-altitude piston-engine fighter the Royal Air Force operated during the Second World War. Fast enough to catch V-1 flying bombs and shoot them down. Fast enough to intercept Me-262 jets in certain tactical situations. The airframe was an engineering achievement. The engine was an engineering obsession. The Napier Sabre, 24 cylinders arranged in an H-block configuration, sleeve valve operation, 2,400 horsepower at war emergency rating. It was the most powerful aircraft piston engine Britain produced during the war and the most demanding to maintain. Ground crews who kept Sabres running reliably were among the most skilled technicians in the RAF. Weeks owns an original Tempest Mk 5, serial number EJ693. It flew active operations with 486 Squadron, including strikes against a V-2 rocket launch site near The Hague. Shortly afterward, the engine failed catastrophically. Pilot Officer Bev Hall put it down in a forced landing that left the airframe in Category B condition, repairable only at depot level, not in the field. The total flight time logged on the airframe since leaving the production line, 28 hours and 38 minutes. The aircraft spent time as a test bench for repaired Sabre engines in Belgium, then entered storage at Delft Technical College in the Netherlands, then the RAF Museum. In 1987, legendary restorer Nick Grace traded a Tempest Mk 2 to the RAF Museum to secure EJ693. Following Grace's death in a car accident in 1998, Weeks purchased the airframe from the estate, outmaneuvering several other well-funded bidders who had been attempting to negotiate the price down. 2 Tempest Mk Visas survive. The other is at the RAF Museum in Hendon and will not fly. When the Weeks restoration is complete, currently being co-developed with Nick Grace's son Richard, who operates a Tempest restoration facility in the UK, EJ693 will be the only flying Tempest Mk 5 on Earth. It has 28 hours on the airframe. The next flight will be the first one in 80 years. The Tempest will be singular when it flies. Number 1 is singular right now. There is no other institution in the world with what Weeks has parked at the end of his seaplane ramp in Polk City, Florida. The short Sunderland entered service with the Royal Air Force in 1938. Its mission: long-range maritime patrol, anti-submarine warfare, convoy protection over the North Atlantic. Its endurance, 16 hours. Its defensive armament, enough machine gun positions spread across nose, dorsal, tail, and beam positions that Luftwaffe pilots gave it a name: Fliegendes Stachelschwein, the Flying Porcupine. ML814 is a Mark 5-4 Pratt & Whitney R-1830 radials, each producing 1,200 horsepower, total 4,800 horsepower. Maximum speed 213 miles per hour. Gross weight 57,000 pounds. Range 2,900 miles. It served with the RAF, transferred to the Royal New Zealand Air Force as NZ-4108, and was eventually converted in Australia to Sandringham civilian passenger configuration. Weeks acquired it in February 1993 from British owner Edward Hulton. In July of the same year, he and a 5-man crew flew it across the North Atlantic, Ireland, Iceland, Canada, and arrived at EAA AirVenture at Oshkosh. The aircraft spent a full year in Wisconsin, while a dedicated heavy-duty seaplane ramp was constructed at Polk City to accommodate its weight. In 1996, ML-814 carried the Olympic torch from Sarasota to Miami as part of the relay for the Atlanta Games. It has been maintained in static condition since the late 1990s. The logistics and expense of operating a 57,000-pound flying boat are beyond what any current program can sustain. There are no other 4-engine passenger flying boats in airworthy condition anywhere in the world. They were all scrapped, sunk, or destroyed. ML-814 survived because Weeks purchased it, flew it across the Atlantic, and built infrastructure around it. That is what private preservation at this level actually costs. Not the acquisition price, not the restoration hours. The infrastructure required to keep the aircraft somewhere it can be properly maintained, built specifically for one airframe, for one collection, in one corner of Central Florida. Number 1. Without question, 150 aircraft. 40 of them the only surviving example of their type. One man, one collection, and a philosophy that refuses to treat any of these machines as static objects. The Sunderland that flew the Atlantic because the seaplane ramp had not been built yet. The Tempest with 28 hours on the airframe, waiting for a Sabre engine to be brought back to operational condition. The Marauder that flew back into the airfield where it earned its worst reputation. The Tin Goose rebuilt with the exact wrong type of rivet ordered replaced before the work could continue. This is what the preservation of aviation history actually requires. It requires someone who will not accept close enough. If this is the kind of collection you are here for, subscribe, because the next video goes inside a single aircraft with a history so specific and so improbable that the research took longer than most scripts. Some of what that aircraft has witnessed has never been properly documented anywhere. Drop Sunderland in the comments if you made it here. Just that.